The wind ran wild across Carter's Hollow, carrying the cold bite of late autumn and something harder to name. A stagecoach rolled away in a cloud of dust, leaving Maggie Doyle standing alone on the ranch porch. Broad-shouldered, quiet-faced, she held her satchel tight. She wasn't a woman folks noticed kindly, but she was a woman who endured. The front door hung open. No welcome, no footsteps, only the sharp cry of an infant echoing through the empty rooms like a warning. Maggie stepped inside without hesitation. The kitchen was cold, the stove nearly dead, a bottle overturned beside wrinkled cloth. She followed the sound down a narrow hall. A small boy lay wailing in a crib worn thin with use. Maggie lifted him with steady arms, humming an old Gaelic tune until his cries softened. When she turned, a tall man stood in the doorway, lean, silent, eyes bruised by grief. "You're the new cook," he said. Maggie nodded. "Margaret Doyle." "Maggie's fine." He looked at the child in her arms, then at her. She met his stare without shrinking. "No one wants a fat girl, sir, but I can care for the baby." A long breath passed between them. "Then stay," he said, and walked away. She didn't exhale until he was gone. The morning light crept slowly across the floorboards, hinting that this place might change her or break her. Dawn slid across the ranch in thin silver lines, touching the windows, the floorboards, the quiet spaces Maggie had stepped into. She moved through the kitchen with purpose, sleeves rolled, the scent of oats and butter warming the cold room. The baby woke with soft whimpers, and she was there before the second cry rose. She cleaned him, fed him, hummed the lullaby that seemed to settle the very air. James entered only after breakfast was set. He left a small note on the counter instead of a greeting. "Feed the baby at 11. Check the fence behind the barn. Lost a few calves." Then he walked out again, boots heavy, shoulders tense. That was his language. Orders instead of conversation. She accepted it. Maggie wasn't a woman who demanded attention. She cooked, cleaned, folded blankets, moved quietly through the house like a steady heartbeat. But the ranch hands noticed her all the same. Their whispers drifted across the yard, sharp as thorns. Bellamy hired a nursemaid. Built like a plow horse, one laughed. Maggie heard them. She always did. She didn't flinch, didn't answer. She simply kept working, her silence stronger than any insult. But small things began to shift. The baby reached for her more. The house smelled of bread again. And when James walked through the door each evening, his eyes lingered a heartbeat longer. Something was changing, slowly, quietly, and it wasn't for nothing. Rain settled over Carter's Hollow for days, turning the yard into thick mud and making every chore heavier. Maggie stepped outside with the baby held close, her bare feet sinking into the earth. Her hair had slipped loose, her dress soaked at the hem, but her focus never wavered. She checked the hands, shielded the child from the wind, moved with the steadiness of someone who refused to break doubt. James rounded the barn and stopped when he saw her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked real. A woman shaped by work, not vanity, rooted, unapologetic. For a moment, he forgot the chores in his hands. "Did you lose your shoes?" he asked quietly. Her cheeks flushed. "No, just outgrew one." The other didn't. He didn't laugh. He didn't pity her. He just nodded once, like he was seeing her for the first time. That night, she sat by the fire, drying the single worn shoe she still had. It was cracked, nearly giving out. She held it gently, remembering every insult she'd ever swallowed. By morning, something waited on the porch. A pair of small leather boots, freshly cleaned, laces tied with care. A folded note inside one of them. "These belong to my sister. I think they'd rather stay here." Maggie ran her fingers along the seams. No tears, no smile, just a quiet fullness she hadn't felt in years. And the next day, she wore them. The wind sharpened as night settled over the ranch, cold enough to slip through the walls and steal the warmth from every room. The baby grew restless, cheeks flushed, breath shaky. Maggie moved fast in the kitchen, boiling ginger, cooling cloths, working with the quiet certainty of someone who had saved a feverish child before. The door swung open hard. James burst in, shirt damp, face tight with fear, the baby crying in his arms. "He won't stop," he said. "He's burning up." Maggie stepped forward, calm, steady. "I know what to do. Ginger water, cool cloth. It eases the heat." But James pulled back. His voice cracked with panic more than anger. "I didn't hire you to be his mother." The words hit harder than he expected, harder than she deserved. Maggie didn't argue, didn't explain. She simply set the warm cloth on the table, nodded once, and walked away. Her footsteps were slow, heavy, but certain. Hours later, the house finally went quiet. James found a small wooden basin outside the door, steam rising, herbs mixed exactly right, a folded towel beside it. No note, no knock. He carried it inside, laid the cool cloth on the baby's burning skin, and watched the fever break just before dawn. Exhausted, he whispered into the stillness, "She's better than I ever deserved," and he knew it was true. Morning crept quietly through the parlor, thin sunlight drifting across dust that floated like memory. Maggie knelt by a bookshelf, wiping each shelf with slow, careful strokes. She welcomed the silence. It was one of the few things in the house that didn't demand anything from her when she reached for a stack of old newspapers. Something slipped. A wooden box tumbled out, and the lid fell open. Inside lay a faded photograph of a delicate young woman, her smile unsure, her eyes hollow with a sadness time couldn't erase. Beside it were letters, edges worn, ink fading. Maggie's breath caught. She tried to close the box quietly, but a shadow filled the doorway. James, he didn't scold her, didn't snatch the box away. He knelt beside her, shoulders slumped under memories he'd never set down. "She wasn't like you," said softly. He lifted the photograph, staring at it with a gaze that carried equal love and regret. She kept trying to be smaller. Thought shrinking made her easier to love. And I let her. Every skipped meal, every hollow in her cheeks. I stayed silent. The truth hung between them, heavy as winter. Maggie didn't offer comfort. She simply placed her warm hand over his. He startled, then held on, rough fingers gripping like he'd been waiting years for someone to reach back. For the first time, he let himself be human. Autumn deepened across Carter's Hollow, laying warm gold over the hills and slowing the world into a gentler rhythm. In the kitchen, Maggie worked dough with steady hands, flour dusting her arms, a loose strand of hair clinging to her cheek. She hummed without thinking, the soft sound wrapping itself around the room like comfort. The door opened quietly. James stepped inside, carrying a folded bundle with a strange mix of hope and fear tugging at his expression. He set it on the table, smoothing the fabric with careful fingers. "I found this in the attic," he said. Maggie wiped her hands and moved closer. When he unfolded the bundle, a dress appeared, cream-colored, soft, modest, time-worn, but beautiful in a way untouched by fashion. She stared, stunned. It was hers, James said, but she never wore it. She kept waiting to be thin enough. His voice cracked around the truth. "I mended it. The stitches aren't perfect. You'll see every seam." Maggie touched the fabric like it might vanish. Her breath shook. James stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. "You're the only one who carries your scars like they mean you lived, not like you should hide." For a moment, the room held its breath. Maggie pressed the dress to her chest, eyes wet, but her tears fell easy, like something healing instead of breaking. And for the first time, she felt chosen. The first frost touched the ranch before winter fully arrived, coating the fields in silver and turning every breath into a cloud. Maggie stood by the fence with her carpet bag at her feet, coat pulled tight, eyes steady but tired. She had fed the baby, set him warm by the hearth, and packed her things in silence. James found her as she tightened the final strap. He knew before she spoke. I cooked. I cared for your boy. I wore the dress, Maggie said softly. But you don't owe me anything. And I won't stay where I'm only needed, not wanted. Her voice didn't waver, but it carried the weight of every goodbye she'd ever learned to make easy. James stepped closer. Is that all this was to you? A role to fill. It was kindness, she answered. Survival, for both of us. But it feels finished now. She bent to lift her bag, and his hand closed gently around her wrist. Not to stop her, just to make her look at him. If I asked you to stay as my wife, would you think it was pity? Maggie searched his face. No, she whispered. But if you don't ask, I'll believe you're afraid. I mean, yes. The cold air held still. James closed his eyes, exhaled like he was letting go of years of fear, then took her hand in both of his. You're the only woman I've ever wanted to walk home with. No grand gesture, no perfect words, just truth, and that was enough. By sunrise, she stood in the kitchen again, coffee steaming beside a simple gold ring left waiting for her. She laughed under her breath, slipped it on when James walked in with the baby, and said one thing: I'll marry you if you wash the dishes. His smile finally reached his eyes, and in that quiet house in Carter's Hollow, they built a life not from perfection, but from choosing each other every day.